On the morning of February 8, 1990, the Guangzhou Police Department received an emergency call from the Tianhe police station. A street cleaner had discovered the body of a woman in an unusual position, thrown by the side of Dunhe Road. The victim was a young woman, approximately 25 years old. According to the preliminary assessment of the police, she could either be a local resident or from a neighboring province. Forensic examination confirmed that the victim had been sexually assaulted before her death. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation caused by a thin object resembling a fishing line. After killing the victim, the perpetrator continued with cruel actions, cutting off sensitive parts of the victim's body. Her underwear and stockings were stuffed into her private parts, a bizarre detail indicating the killer's perverse motive. Faced with the chilling crime scene, the public began to ask, what kind of motive could drive the perpetrator to commit such a heinous act? Like and subscribe to our channel to uncover the mystery behind this shocking case. At around 6 a.m. on February 8, 1990, a street cleaner working along Dunhe Road noticed a hand protruding from the bushes, about 10 meters from the main road. At first, he thought it was just a drunk person who had collapsed by the roadside after a long night. Curious, he approached, only to be horrified when he realized it was not a drunk person, but the lifeless body of a woman lying motionless in the wild grass. The victim's clothes were disheveled, her pupils were dilated, her mouth was open wide, her tongue sticking out, and her body was curled up in a fetal position. A sight that would send chills down anyone's spine. The street cleaner quickly called the police to report the crime. Less than 15 minutes later, local police arrived at the scene, cordoned off the area, and began collecting evidence. Based on the victim's physical characteristics, the police estimated that she was around 25 years old. The victim's body was partially concealed by wild grass, and her wrists showed signs of restraint by a rope. Her fingertips had bruises and scratches, indicating that she had struggled fiercely while being attacked. However, the police noticed that the crime scene lacked signs of a struggle, suggesting that the victim might have been murdered elsewhere before her body was moved to this location for disposal. The autopsy results indicated that the victim had been dead for about 6 hours before being discovered, meaning the murder took place around midnight on February 7, 1990. This suggested that the killer acted late at night, taking advantage of the deserted streets to commit the crime unnoticed. At the crime scene, the police found traces of a man's shoe prints, but no signs of any vehicle tracks. This could indicate that the perpetrator had transported the body using some means before leaving the scene on foot. Recognizing the severity of the case, the Guangzhou Police Department quickly established a special task force. The police immediately launched 2 main investigative directions. First, they aimed to quickly identify the victim, gather information about her identity, residence, and anyone related to her. Next, they narrowed down potential witnesses by interviewing locals to find anyone displaying suspicious behavior. However, both initial investigative directions yielded no positive results. No one recognized the victim, there were no missing person reports matching the description, and no witnesses saw anything suspicious the night before. This raised the possibility that the victim was not a resident of Guangzhou but may have come from elsewhere. Additionally, the area where the body was found was a deserted road with almost no pedestrians at night. Notably, early in the morning, only a few vehicles passed through, so the body may have been left there late at night, just before dawn. However, the police found no tire marks or any vehicle traces near the scene, complicating the investigation. The perpetrator may have stopped the vehicle some distance from the crime scene and then carried the victim's body into the grass. A year passed, but the case remained unsolved and gradually fell into stagnation. The victim's identity was still unknown, and no relatives came forward to claim the unidentified body. The police began to fear that if no breakthrough was made, the case might be forgotten. But that fear did not last long, because exactly 1 year later, on February 10, 1991, another case occurred, reigniting public interest. On a road in the outskirts, residents discovered the body of a young woman, around 20 years old, with similar signs to the February 8, 1990 case. Less than 6 months later, another female body was found in the suburban area near Guangzhou, once again showing the same gruesome method of killing. According to the autopsy results, the victim had been killed before being dismembered. The perpetrator not only killed, but also dismembered the victim in a crude and unprofessional manner. Police estimated that the perpetrator took between 2 to 3 hours to dismember the body. By August 1991, after the third case occurred, Guangzhou police realized they were dealing with a real serial killer. At that time, DNA testing was not widely available. Only major cities like Guangzhou, Beijing, and Shanghai had the resources to conduct such analyses. However, forensic results led to a breakthrough. The semen samples collected from all 3 crime scenes were an exact match, confirming that the same perpetrator was responsible for all 3 murders. This case raised serious concerns, as the perpetrator did not stop after each murder, but showed a tendency to continue committing crimes. While the investigation was still ongoing, a 4th case unexpectedly occurred in October. The victim was a woman around 20 years old, whose body was tightly wrapped in a burlap sack. However, in this case, the police discovered a key witness. This witness was a local resident who reported seeing a small truck parked near the crime scene for an unusually long time on the night before the body was found. What caught the police's attention was the description of the driver. A middle-aged man with suspicious behavior who had been seen frequently in the area at night in recent weeks. Notably, the truck had no rear license plate, indicating that the driver had deliberately removed it to avoid identification. The police immediately launched a search for the suspicious truck, reviewing toll booth records, traffic cameras on major roads, and surrounding areas. Besides the truck, a burlap sack discarded near the scene was also considered a crucial piece of evidence linked to the suspect. In early March 1992, the Guangzhou Police Department launched a large-scale manhunt determined to track down the serial killer. Over 30,000 leaflets were printed and distributed, including images of the burlap sack containing the victim's body, a plea for public information, and warnings about potential danger. At the same time, police were ordered to investigate over 3,800 grain warehouses and hemp textile factories across Guangdong province and neighboring areas to trace the origin of the burlap sacks used for disposing of the victims. The investigation lasted for months. Over 4,600 burlap sacks were sent to the Agricultural Science Institute for analysis, and 1,686,000 fingerprints were examined. Finally, police managed to collect the suspect's DNA, but they were still unable to match it to a specific identity. In July 1992, the Guangzhou Public Security Bureau identified a soldier from Garrison Unit 6807 named Jiang Qide as a potential suspect in one of the cases. Jiang was immediately arrested, but after interrogation and forensic testing, he was proven innocent. Although the arrest did not yield the expected results, it led police to reassess the entire case. They realized that the perpetrator had distinct characteristics that had not been fully considered before. Based on the locations where bodies were dumped, police narrowed down the suspect's work or residence to the Xinjiao town area of Haizhu District, Guangzhou. Since all the victims were women, police hypothesized that the killer's motive stemmed from hatred towards women. By analyzing patterns from previous cases, criminal psychologists determined that the suspect was likely between 20 and 40 years old. All the murders involved brutal treatment of the victims' bodies and the insertion of foreign objects, suggesting that the perpetrator had sexual behavioral disorders. At all crime scenes where bodies were disposed of, police found tire tracks, indicating that the perpetrator used a vehicle to transport the victims. Upon re-examining the crime scenes, forensic experts discovered a critical detail. Although some victims' clothes were removed, they still wore jewelry. Based on this discovery, police decided to change their investigation strategy, shifting their focus to jewelry stores in the area. The jewelry worn by the victims looked like real gold, but was actually gold-plated alloy. This raised an important question. Why were all the victims wearing fake jewelry? In Guangdong, women generally care about appearances, and wearing fake jewelry is uncommon. Upon deeper investigation, police discovered that a group of women often wore fake jewelry to avoid being robbed. Notably, they were mostly women working in nighttime entertainment venues. The perpetrator might have targeted prostitutes or women who frequently appeared in red light districts. Most of the victims did not have household registrations in Guangzhou, many used fake names, and they had no contact with their families. So no missing person reports were filed. Although identifying the victim's profession was a major breakthrough, police still could not find the perpetrator's identity. This caused the case to once again reach a deadlock, becoming an unsolved mystery. On the morning of September 19, 1994, Shijiao Town's police chief, Lu Guangrong, received an emergency report from a young woman named Huang Yanhong. She reported that on the previous night, she had narrowly escaped being murdered by a strange man at a train station. Huang Yanhong recounted that she had come to Guangzhou seeking a job, but as soon as she got off the train, her wallet was stolen by a pickpocket. By that time, it was already 11 p.m., and she found herself stranded at an unfamiliar train station without any money. Suddenly, a small truck pulled up near her. The middle-aged man inside rolled down the window and asked if she needed a ride. Seeing her hesitation, he took out an old police uniform, showed it to her, and claimed that he was an officer offering her a free ride. Initially, Huang Yanhong thought she was lucky to have met a kind person. But as the truck drove into increasingly dark and desolate roads, she began to feel uneasy. Before coming to Guangzhou, she had heard about the serial murders occurring in the city. The thought gradually surfaced in her mind, making her clutch her jacket tightly as her heartbeat quickened. As the vehicle continued driving into a remote village, the darkness engulfed the road ahead. By now, her fear had reached its peak. Unable to wait any longer, Huang Yanhong risked opening the car door, jumping out and running for her life. Behind her, hurried footsteps echoed. The man was chasing after her. She ran towards a nearby garbage dump, trying to stay calm and hide in a dark corner. Her breath was rapid, but she held it in, hoping he would leave. After about 2 hours, thinking the coast was clear, she slowly stepped away. But unexpectedly, the man was still standing there, silently waiting for her to reappear. He lunged at her, grabbed her, and attempted to kill her on the spot. At that moment, car headlights flashed from a distance, and a vehicle suddenly drove past the small road. Afraid of being caught, the man immediately released her and fled into the night. After calming herself, Huang Yanhong immediately went to the police station to report the crime. Police launched an investigation right away. Through screening and analyzing testimonies, they identified the prime suspect as Luo Shubiao. When compared with the witness, Huang Yanhong immediately identified Luo Shubiao as the man who attacked her. In May 1995, police raided Luo Shubiao's house. What they found inside made everyone shudder. Dozens of women's clothing items were scattered around, along with blood-stained personal belongings hidden in drawers. More horrifyingly, when the police broke open a locked metal cabinet, they found preserved human body parts inside. DNA testing confirmed that these body parts belonged to at least 17 previous murder victims. Scattered throughout the room were mannequins or human-like figures dressed in clothes stolen from the victims, as if Luo was recreating his gruesome crimes. All the evidence collected confirmed Luo Shubiao was the serial killer that police had been hunting for years. After being arrested, Luo Shubiao admitted to killing a total of 17 victims over 4.5 years. His wife, Lu Meiting, had no knowledge of his brutal crimes. To understand his motives and the origins of his cruelty, investigators traced Luo Shubiao's past, uncovering a dark childhood and twisted thoughts that shaped his path to crime. Luo Shubiao was born on August 20, 1954, in Guangzhou, into a poor working-class family. He was an only child, introverted, and had few friends. Since middle school, he had engaged in theft, frequently stealing from classmates and neighbors, but was never caught. After graduating, he trained as a carpenter but could not hold a steady job, often quitting midway. In 1974, at the age of 20, Luo was arrested for theft for the first time and sentenced to 2 years of re-education through labor. In early 1977, Luo sneaked into the Home Appliance Research Institute intending to steal, but was caught by a female employee named Fen Liyun. Fearing arrest, he murdered her with an iron rod and then violated her corpse. However, since there were no witnesses and the police found no clear evidence, he escaped punishment. In 1979, Luo was arrested again for theft and sentenced to 3 years of re-education. While in prison, he exhibited severe, deviant behavior, including secretly stealing underwear from female inmates and guards. After being released in 1982, Luo married Liu Meiting and had 2 children. During the early years of marriage, Luo seemed to change, working diligently and becoming a model husband and father. During the day, he worked as an interior designer for a private company. At night, he worked as a truck driver, transporting grain within Guangdong province, a job that allowed him to travel frequently without raising suspicion. However, this change was just a facade. Internally, his mind was becoming increasingly twisted and perverse. He frequently watched extreme violent pornography, particularly obsessed with serial murders, such as the case of Lam Korwan, a Hong Kong killer known for dismembering his victims. These twisted thoughts drove him to seek ways to satisfy his deviant desires. At first, Luo tried to suppress his urges by collecting discarded mannequins from fashion stores. He dressed them, applied makeup, and used them to satisfy himself. But that was not enough. On the night of February 7, 1990, after driving around Xinzhou for 2 hours, he picked up a prostitute and took her to Pazhou Dairy Farm, a deserted area with no passersby. When the woman resisted fiercely, he strangled her with a fishing line, subduing her until she stopped breathing. After she became motionless, he then violated her corpse. This was his first murder, marking the beginning of his horrifying killing spree. After committing the gruesome act, Luo Shubiao dumped the victim's body by the roadside on Dunhai Street. Returning home, he was engulfed by the fear of being caught. The next day, he returned to the crime scene to check whether the body had been discovered. However, after a long time without any police movement, he gradually realized that they were only focusing on investigating people close to the victim. This allowed him to escape suspicion, giving him the confidence to continue his crimes. From February 1991, Luo Shubiao continued his crimes, always striking at night. He used a truck to transport the bodies home, hiding them in the attic, which became the site of his gruesome acts. There, he dismembered the victims, removed certain body parts, and even deliberately left traces to taunt the police. After satisfying himself, Luo stuffed the victims' bodies into sacks, oil drums, or wooden crates and dumped them in remote areas of Xinjiao town. One time, while disposing of a body, his wife, Liu Meiting, accidentally witnessed the horrifying scene. Luo quickly made up a story. He told her that it was a person who had died in a traffic accident that he had accidentally hit, and if the truth got out, he would go to jail. Shaken by her husband's plea, Liu Meiting reluctantly helped him conceal this horrifying secret, unaware that her husband was a serial killer. After each murder, Luo meticulously recorded the victim's physical characteristics, their clothing, their reactions, his physical experiences, his emotions, and the process of disposing of the bodies. He kept the diary as a trophy, frequently rereading it to relive the gruesome memories. Upon hearing that law enforcement was tightening the investigation, Luo panicked and immediately destroyed his original records, but later rewrote them in a coded format. On the night of May 25, 1992, Luo was arrested by Tianhe District Police on charges of soliciting prostitution. He was sent to a labor camp for 6 months. There, he read the investigative report from the City Public Security Bureau about the serial murders. Realizing that the police were getting very close to solving the case, Luo decided to escape from the labor camp. He stopped killing for 6 months to avoid detection. However, in March 1994, he could no longer control himself and resumed his crimes, killing 4 more prostitutes before being arrested in September of the same year. On January 18, 1995, Luo Shubiao was tried at the Guangzhou Intermediate People's Court. With overwhelming evidence, he was sentenced to death for murder. 2 days later, on January 20, 1995, Luo Shubiao was executed by firing squad, ending his horrific 4-year killing spree. The case was closed with widespread public approval. Many believed that the sentence was completely justified given his crimes. The victims' families expressed their sorrow, but also felt a sense of relief, that justice had been served. Thank you for following this story. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to avoid missing more horrifying and mysterious crime cases. Remember, no matter how terrifying the truth is, it must be told to ensure justice is upheld.